The grand hall of diplomatic convergence hummed, with the anxious murmurs of 273 distinct species. The vast chamber, a masterpiece of multidimensional architecture, had been designed to accommodate beings of all morphologies, from the gaseous vril collective that hovered near the ceiling to the silicate granulons who preferred to embed themselves in specially designed floor panels. Today, the hall's adaptive acoustics struggled to contain the crescendo of alarm that rippled through the assembly. High Chancellor Omox, a being of liquid metallic composition who communicated through careful modulations of surface tension and reflectivity, pulsed with the ultraviolet patterns that signaled extreme distress. The Chancellor's translation unit converted these patterns to words that echoed throughout the chamber. "Order!" it boomed. "The Galactic Accord demands order in this time of unprecedented crisis." The assembly's cacophony gradually subsided, though the biometric sensors embedded in the hall's structure registered elevated stress hormones, accelerated respiration, and numerous equivalents of perspiration across nearly all delegates. Ambassador Zixnathi, representing the methane-breathing Quarian Federation, extended 3 of her sensory tendrils in the formal gesture of recognized speech. "High Chancellor, with all due respect to protocol, we cannot simply proceed with standard parliamentary procedure. The Seldorans are gone. The crystalline ones, our peacekeepers, our guardians for 12 millennia, have destroyed themselves in a civil war none of us even knew was brewing beneath their perfect facades." Her words triggered another wave of agitated vocalizations throughout the hall. The Seldorans had been the cornerstone of galactic peace since the Accord's founding. Their crystalline bodies, capable of absorbing and redirecting almost any form of energy, had made them the perfect peacekeepers. Their logical, dispassionate nature had earned them trust across the spectrum of sentient civilization. And now, in a cataclysmic act of self-annihilation that had occurred just 27 standard cycles ago, they had shattered themselves into cosmic dust. Representative Tolk of the Ganid Commonality rapped his chitinous forelimbs against his speaking platform. The sharp, clicking sound cut through the noise. "We must appoint a new guardian species immediately. The Vorath have already sensed our vulnerability. Our long-range sensors detect unusual activity along the Cygnus arm. We estimate no more than 40 cycles before they test our defenses." High Chancellor Omox rippled silver blue with concern. "The Accord Charter is clear. A guardian species must be unanimously endorsed by all member civilizations. The process of evaluation alone is estimated to require at minimum 3 standard years." "We don't have 3 years," Tolk's translator barely managed to convert his agitated clicking into comprehensible speech. "The Vorath will have consumed half the Accord's territories by then." The Vorath were not technically a species, but a technological collective, self-replicating machines that had evolved from an ancient civilization's defense system. They operated on a simple directive: consume resources to build more Vorath. They had been contained for millennia by the Seldorans, whose crystalline bodies could absorb and redirect the Vorath's energy weapons. Without the Seldorans, the Accord's diverse species, each with their own specialized biology and technology, would be vulnerable in different, unpredictable ways. As the debate intensified, a curious disturbance manifested near the junior delegate's entrance. A bipedal species, previously unregistered in the main assembly, was attempting to gain entry. The hall's security protocols initially rejected them, but after a confusing exchange with the algorithmic gatekeepers, the small delegation was reluctantly admitted. 5 creatures entered, walking on 2 legs, with only 2 manipulating appendages and a single head each, a strangely limited morphology by galactic standards. Their bodies were wrapped in synthetic materials of deep blue, with curious symbolic patterns embedded in the chest areas. They were oxygen breathers, carbon-based, and from the readings, the hall's sensors automatically displayed, possessed an internal skeleton of calcium compounds, an inefficient design that nonetheless seem to have survived their planetary evolution. The tallest of them, a being with skin the color of pond sediment and a crown of dark fibers on its head, stepped forward. The creature pulled out a small device, activated it, and began to speak. "Esteemed delegates of the Galactic Accord," the translation came through with surprising clarity. "We are representatives of Earth, a planet in what you designate as the Sol system of the Orion Spur. We understand you face a crisis with the loss of your guardian species. We have come to volunteer for the position." For 3 full seconds, an eternity in diplomatic time, absolute silence gripped the hall. Then, like a dam breaking, the chamber erupted in what the humans' translators rendered mostly as laughter, with undertones of disbelief, contempt, and in some cases, concern for the newcomer's mental stability. High Chancellor Omox's surface rippled with patterns that indicated confusion, mixed with diplomatic restraint. "You are humans, correct? Your species achieved faster-than-light travel less than 100 years ago. You have been observers to the Accord for barely 50 years, and you have been involved in no fewer than 17 diplomatic incidents during that short period." The lead human nodded. "That is correct, High Chancellor." Ambassador Zixnathi's tendrils coiled in what her species considered hilarious disbelief. "Your delegate Yamamoto nearly caused an interspecies incident by accidentally releasing a particulate cloud that sent the Miclith delegation into reproductive frenzy during the Trade Summit of 2257. "A regrettable misunderstanding," the human acknowledged, "involving talcum powder and atmospheric compatibility issues that have since been addressed." Representative Tulk clicked rapidly. "Your species still engages in internal conflicts over resource distribution and ideological differences. How could you possibly serve as peacekeepers for the entire galaxy?" The human diplomat, who had introduced herself as Ambassador Sophia Chen, remained remarkably composed in the face of the Assembly's skepticism. "With respect, Representative Tulk, it is precisely because we understand conflict that we might excel at preventing it. The Seldorans were perfect beings of crystalline logic. They never truly understood the emotional, messy, sometimes irrational nature of disputes. We do. We've lived it." Another delegate, a gaseous entity that communicated through pheromonal bursts, released what translated as, "Preposterous. The guardian species must command respect through demonstrated power. Humanity's military capacity is ranked 73rd among known spacefaring civilizations." Ambassador Chen nodded. "By conventional metrics, yes. But conventional metrics are exactly what failed to prevent the Seldorans' self-destruction, aren't they?" A murmur passed through the assembly. The human had made a valid point, however uncomfortable. High Chancellor Omox's surface stilled into formal patterns. "While we appreciate Earth's ambitious offer, there are protocols that must be followed. A comprehensive evaluation of any candidate species requires—" The Chancellor was interrupted by a piercing alarm that caused several delegates to retract sensory organs in pain. The hall's central holographic display activated automatically, showing a 3-dimensional tactical map of the Cygnus Arm. A swarm of red indicators was moving at impossible speed toward the Accord's territories. "Vorith detection confirmed," announced the hall's security system. "Current velocity indicates arrival at the Promethean Gateway in 6 standard hours." Panic erupted across the assembly. 6 hours. Not 40 cycles. 6 hours. The Promethean Gateway was the Accord's primary transit hub, connecting 17 major systems. If the Vorith seized it, they would have access to the heart of Accord space. "Emergency protocols!" shouted Representative Tulk. "Activate the defensive grid! Summon all available ships!" High Chancellor Omox pulsed rapid patterns of command to the hall systems. The defensive grid was maintained by Seldoran technicians. It's operating at 12% capacity. Available ships in the sector can intercept in 9 hours at maximum speed. The humans exchanged glances. Ambassador Chen stepped forward again. High Chancellor, we may have a solution. This is hardly the time for your species' hubris, hissed a reptilian delegate from the upper tiers. It's not hubris, responded Chen calmly. It's a different approach. The Vorath operate on collective logic, correct? Their decision-making is distributed across their network, but fundamentally binary in nature. High Chancellor Omox rippled affirmatively. This is known. It is why the Seldorans could counter them. Crystal lattice quantum computing matched against quantum mechanical swarm intelligence. We don't have Seldoran computing, said Chen. But we have something they lacked, paradox tolerance. She gestured to one of her companions, a smaller human with skin several shades darker than her own. He stepped forward, carrying what appeared to be a primitive device by Accord standards, a jumble of components clearly assembled in haste. This is Dr. Elijah Kapoor, our xenolinguistics specialist. Chen introduced. He has a proposal. Dr. Kapoor cleared his throat. The Vorath's collective intelligence operates on strict logical parameters. It has to, for a distributed consciousness to function coherently. We've been studying their communication patterns since we gained access to Accord records. They're vulnerable to certain forms of logical disruption that organic minds simply process differently. Representative Tolk clicked skeptically. What are you suggesting? A targeted transmission of human paradoxes, koans, and logical impossibilities, translated into the Vorath's base communication protocol. Dr. Kapoor explained. Not as an attack, but as an engagement. Their system will be compelled to process the inputs, creating a recursive loop of evaluation. It won't destroy them, but it should distract them significantly. Ambassador Zixnathi's tendrils coiled tightly. You want to confuse the Vorath with riddles. Not exactly, corrected Kapoor. More like exploiting a processing vulnerability. The Seldorans couldn't conceptualize this approach because they shared the Vorath's intolerance for logical inconsistency. Humans, however, live with contradiction every day. We simultaneously hold opposing viewpoints. We use metaphor and irony. We find meaning in absurdity. High Chancellor Omox's surface displayed patterns of deep skepticism. And you believe this will stop a Vorath invasion fleet? We believe it will buy us time to establish communication, Ambassador Chen said. The Vorath have never been reasoned with because no one could speak to them without being immediately targeted as a resource to consume. If we can interrupt their standard protocols long enough to initiate dialogue. Impossible, exclaimed multiple delegates at once. 6 hours until Vorath arrival at Promethean Gateway. The hall's system announced dispassionately. High Chancellor Omox rippled with decision patterns. We have no alternative strategies that can be implemented in the available time frame. Humanity's proposal, while unprecedented, will be permitted. Dr. Kapoor immediately began coordinating with the hall's communication systems, while the other human delegates huddled around portable devices they had brought with them. The assembly watched with a mixture of desperate hope and resigned skepticism as the humans worked with remarkable speed, occasionally arguing among themselves in their native language before reaching consensus. 5 hours and 43 minutes later, Dr. Kapoor looked up from his improvised workstation. We're ready to transmit. The hall's main display showed the Vorath fleet, now just 17 minutes from the Promethean Gateway. The swarm of self-replicating machines had grown visibly during their approach, having consumed several uninhabited planetoids en route. What exactly will you be transmitting? Asked High Chancellor Omox. A carefully structured sequence beginning with the liar paradox, progressing through Zeno's paradoxes, the ship of Theseus problem, Gödel's incompleteness theorems, and several quantum mechanical observer effect scenarios, explained Kapoor. All translated into their base code language but maintaining the fundamental logical inconsistencies. Ambassador Chen added. Following this, we'll transmit an invitation to communication, structured as a game theory optimal strategy that makes engagement more logical than consumption. The assembly watched in tense silence as Dr. Kapoor initiated the transmission. On the tactical display, the Vorath swarm continued its approach for several minutes. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, their formation began to change. The leading edge slowed, then stopped entirely. The following units began to arrange themselves in curious patterns, breaking their usual efficient consumption configuration. "They're processing," whispered Kapoor, "and responding." The hall's communication system registered an incoming transmission from the Vorath, the first non-aggressive communication ever recorded from the collective. "Translate," commanded High Chancellor Omox. The message was bizarre, a mixture of mathematical symbols, logical statements, and what appeared to be attempts at metaphorical language. Dr. Kapoor worked frantically with his team to interpret it. "They're confused," he said finally. "But in a productive way. They're attempting to resolve the paradoxes we've presented by creating new logical frameworks. And they're curious about us. They're requesting more information about human cognition." Ambassador Chen stepped forward. "Chancellor, with your permission, we'd like to continue this dialogue. We believe we can establish preliminary diplomatic contact." The assembly erupted in astonished murmurs. The Vorath, the implacable, consuming terror of the galaxy, were engaging in communication rather than consumption. "Proceed," said the Chancellor, surface rippling with cautious hope. For the next 3 hours, the human team worked tirelessly, exchanging increasingly complex communications with the Vorath collective. The invasion fleet remained stationary, its units occasionally reconfiguring into new patterns that Dr. Kapoor suggested might represent evolving thought structures. Finally, Ambassador Chen addressed the assembly again. "The Vorath have agreed to a preliminary non-consumption pact for a period of 1 standard year, during which time they will engage in philosophical exchange with humanity regarding the nature of existence, purpose, and resource utilization. They find our paradoxical thinking nutritionally satisfying in their terms. It seems that logical puzzles provide a form of stimulation their consumption directive never offered." The assembly's reaction was beyond description in any single species terms. Emotions, ranging from disbelief to euphoria, rippled through the hall. High Chancellor Omox's surface displayed patterns never before recorded in the Accord's extensive diplomatic archives, a metallic being's expression of profound astonishment. "You've achieved in hours what 12,000 years of Seldoran peacekeeping could not," the Chancellor stated. "The Vorath have never negotiated. They have only consumed or been repelled." "Humans are good at finding third options," said Ambassador Chen with a small smile. "We call it lateral thinking." In the days that followed, the human delegation worked closely with Accord specialists to establish more formal communication protocols with the Vorath. The collective remained near the Promethean gateway, but now as an engaged party rather than an invading force. Several of their units were permitted to visit the gateway station under careful supervision, where they demonstrated an unexpected capacity for curiosity when presented with new logical frameworks. Ambassador Zixnathi, who had been among the most dismissive of humanity's capabilities, approached Ambassador Chen during one of the few rest periods the humans allowed themselves. "Your method was unorthodox," the Quarian acknowledged. "And frankly, most of us believed it to be delusional. Yet it succeeded where 12 millennia of conventional defense failed. How did you know it would work?" Chen considered the question carefully. "We didn't know for certain. But throughout human history, we've seen that the most rigid systems are often the most vulnerable to unexpected approaches. The Vorath were perfect in their way. Perfectly logical, perfectly efficient, perfectly predictable. Perfection is brittle. And humanity is not perfect," Zixnathi observed. "Not even close," Chen agreed. "We're contradictory, emotional, sometimes irrational. We make mistakes. But we learn from them, adapt, try new approaches. We contain multitudes, as one of our poets once said. That's our strength. 3 months later, the Grand Hall of Diplomatic Convergence was once again filled to capacity. The agenda contained only a single item: the formal consideration of humanity as the Accord's new guardian species. The debate had been intense, with numerous species raising valid concerns about human unpredictability, their internal conflicts, and their relative technological immaturity. Yet the successful negotiation with the Vorath, now extended to a 5-year non-consumption agreement and the beginnings of philosophical exchange, had made an indelible impression. Moreover, human diplomatic teams had demonstrated remarkable adaptability, working tirelessly to understand the unique perspectives of each Accord species and finding creative compromises for long-standing disputes. High Chancellor Omox called the assembly to order. We have deliberated extensively on humanity's application for guardian species status. We have conducted risk assessments, cultural compatibility analyses, and extensive interviews. We have witnessed their unprecedented success with the Vorath Collective. The time has come for a decision. The voting process took nearly 6 hours, as each of the 273 member species registered their position through their unique decision-making protocols. Some, like the Vril Collective, reached consensus almost instantly. Others, such as the neuroreal mind clusters, engaged in extensive internal debate that manifested as visible brainwave patterns across their communal consciousness. Finally, the last vote was registered. High Chancellor Omox's surface rippled with formal announcement patterns. By a vote of 272 in favor, with 1 abstention, humanity is hereby designated as the Accord's new guardian species. The lone abstention had come from humanity itself, a gesture that Ambassador Chen explained was to demonstrate that they did not presume to vote on their own worthiness. The ceremonial aspects followed. A representative from each major Accord region presented the human delegation with symbolic gifts, technological, biological, and conceptual contributions to help them in their new role. The most significant was the Guardian Orb, a device of Seldoran origin that connected to all Accord defense and communication systems. It had been recovered from the cosmic debris of the Seldoran homeworld, one of the few artifacts to survive their self-annihilation. As Ambassador Chen accepted the orb, which hovered above her open palms, she addressed the assembly. Humanity accepts this responsibility with humility and determination. We are not perfect. We will make mistakes, but we promise to learn from them. We promise to listen to all voices in the Accord, to respect the unique perspectives each species brings, and to defend not just your physical existence, but your right to self-determination. She paused, looking at the diverse assembly. The Seldorans were remarkable guardians in their time. They protected through strength and logic. We will protect through understanding and adaptation. Where they stood as perfect sentinels, we will walk alongside you as imperfect companions. Our history is filled with conflict, yes, but also with reconciliation, with the capacity to change and grow. This is what we offer the Accord, not perfection, but perpetual improvement. The orb pulsed with light as it synchronized with the human delegate, accepting her as its new custodian. Throughout the hall, translation systems conveyed her words into hundreds of different communication forms: chemical signals, radiation patterns, vibrational sequences, neural impulses, reaching every delegate in their native understanding. High Chancellor Omox's surface displayed the formal patterns of covenant acceptance. The Accord welcomes humanity as its guardians. May your imperfections be our salvation. As the ceremonial aspects concluded, Ambassador Chen found herself approached by Representative Tulk, whose earlier skepticism had been among the most vocal. "I voted in favor," the Ganid said without preamble. "But I remain concerned. Your species still fights itself over resources and beliefs." How can we be certain you won't bring those conflicts into your role as guardians? Chen nodded, acknowledging the legitimate concern. Those conflicts are part of who we are. Representative. We don't claim to have transcended them entirely. But becoming guardians gives humanity something we've often lacked. A purpose larger than ourselves. A responsibility that transcends our differences. She gestured toward the assembled human delegation. Individuals from different nations, ethnicities, and backgrounds who had worked together seamlessly during the crisis. When faced with the Vorath, our internal differences became insignificant. We saw a greater challenge and rose to meet it united. I believe that serving as guardians will help humanity continue to grow beyond our divisions. Not by eliminating our differences, but by finding common purpose through them. Tulk's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. A curious approach. The Seldorans sought to eliminate all internal conflict through perfect logical consensus. And perhaps that was their downfall, Chen suggested. A system without internal tension has no way to adapt when fundamental assumptions are challenged. The conflict that erupted among them had no precedent, no containment mechanisms. They shattered rather than bent. While humans bend considerably, observed Tulk. Sometimes we break too, Chen admitted. But we've become quite good at putting ourselves back together, usually stronger at the broken places. As the delegates dispersed, returning to their worlds with news of the Accord's new guardians, the human team gathered in their temporary quarters. The guardian orb hovered in the center of the room, pulsing occasionally as it continued to integrate with their communication systems. So, said Dr. Kapoor, breaking the contemplative silence. Guardians of the Galaxy. Bit more responsibility than we signed up for when we joined the diplomatic corps. Speak for yourself, replied Lieutenant Maya Rodriguez, the team's security specialist. I always wanted to save the galaxy. I just didn't think it would involve paradoxes, rather than photon torpedoes. Ambassador Chen smiled at her team. What we did with the Vorath was just the beginning. Being guardians means we need to understand every species in the Accord, their needs, their perspectives, their unique ways of experiencing reality. We need to be translators in the broadest sense, helping vastly different beings find common ground. We're going to need more people, noted Communications Officer Thomas Okafor. A lot more. Already in progress, Chen assured him. The United Earth Council is establishing a dedicated Guardian service. Training programs are being developed. We'll be recruiting from every nation, every discipline. And the Vorath, asked Dr. Kapoor. Our paradox approach won't work forever. They're already developing countermeasures, cognitive frameworks that can process contradiction without disruption. Good, said Chen, surprising him. That's exactly what we want. The goal was never to keep them permanently confused, but to help them evolve beyond their consumption directive. They're developing philosophical curiosity. That's a foundation we can build on. The orb pulsed more brightly, as if responding to her words. The team had been told that the device was semi-sentient, capable of learning and adapting to its custodians. I still can't believe the Seldorans destroyed themselves, said Rodriguez quietly. They seemed so perfect. Perhaps that was the problem, Chen mused. They had no experience with imperfection, with failure, with the messy process of making mistakes and learning from them. When their perfect system developed a flaw, they had no framework for adaptation. She reached out, letting her fingers hover just above the orb's luminescent surface. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our intelligence or our technology. It's our resilience, our ability to fail, learn, and try again. To contain contradictions without shattering. To change our minds when presented with new information. The orb's light seemed to intensify under her hand, pulsing in rhythm with her words. The galaxy doesn't need perfect guardians, she continued. It needs guardians who understand imperfection, who recognize that peace isn't the absence of conflict, but the ability to navigate it constructively. Dr. Kapoor nodded slowly. So our first official act as guardians is to listen, Chen said firmly, to all 273 species, to understand their fears, their needs, their perspectives. The Seldorans maintained peace through power and logic. We'll maintain it through understanding and adaptation. Outside their window, the vast structure of the diplomatic convergence station glittered against the backdrop of space. Beyond it, the first Vorath philosophical delegation was arriving, former conquest units now reconfigured for dialogue, their very existence a testament to the possibility of change. Ambassador Chen looked out at the stars, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Humanity had volunteered for this role, not because they were qualified, but because they recognized that qualification itself needed redefining. The galaxy didn't need another perfect, crystalline guardian that might shatter under pressure. It needed a guardian that understood brokenness, that had experienced conflict and emerged stronger for it. The orb pulsed once more, then settled into a steady glow, accepting its new custodians with all their contradictions and potential. Ambassador Sophia Chen smiled. Humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning. In the vast chamber of the Grand Hall, now empty of delegates, but still humming with the echoes of the historic decision, High Chancellor Omox floated alone, surface rippling with contemplative patterns. The liquid metallic being had lived for over 300 years and had served through the final centuries of Seldoran guardianship. The Chancellor had witnessed their perfect, dispassionate protection and their catastrophic end. Computer, Omox pulsed. Access historical archives. Display the original guardian species criteria established at the Accord's founding. The holographic display shimmered to life, showing ancient text in the original unified script of the founding species. A guardian species must possess overwhelming defensive capability, read the first criterion. They must demonstrate perfect logical consistency in their decision-making, read the second. They must stand apart from lesser conflicts, maintaining objective neutrality in all matters, not threatening galactic stability, read the third. Humanity violated every one of these criteria. Their defensive capabilities were modest at best. Their decision-making incorporated emotional components alongside logic, and they had demonstrated a persistent tendency to involve themselves in matters that did not directly concern them, driven by what they called empathy. Yet they had succeeded where the Seldorans had failed. They had turned an existential threat into a philosophical conversation. They had demonstrated that guardianship might take forms the Accord's founders had never imagined. Omox's surface rippled with a pattern that the Accord systems would have translated as wry amusement, had anyone been present to receive it. Computer, the Chancellor pulsed. Begin new entry in the Chancellor's private log. Title, On the Virtues of Imperfection. As the system prepared to record, Omox reflected on the curious poetry of the moment. The perfect guardians had shattered themselves, and now the galaxy's protection rested in the hands of a species whose greatest strength was their comfort with their own flaws. It was either the beginning of a new era of peace, or the prelude to chaos beyond imagining. Perhaps, Omox reflected, it was somehow both at once. The humans would probably appreciate that paradox. Begin recording, the Chancellor pulsed, and started to compose the thoughts that would one day form the philosophical foundation of the Accord's next 12,000 years.